Too.
All right, going live on YouTube and 3, 2, 1.
Are we ready to fire on getting close to YouTube Live, Neil?
We are live.
We are live. No. Oh, okay. I've got it back in the background there.
All right, going live on YouTube and 3, 2, 1.
Are we ready to fire on getting close to YouTube Live, Neil? I thought I had previously muted, but now it is muted again. All right, I guess we are going live on YouTube. So sorry about the little momentary pause there. Oh, okay. I've got it back in the background there. We are here with Ben Higgins. It's cool, man. Are we ready to fire on? You want to say hello, Ben? YouTube Live, Neil.
What's up, everybody? I'm glad we know we're live. We can stop saying all the typical stuff we were saying before, clean it up a bit,
sorry about
get back in the rhythm.
Indeed. So Ben, when we start recording, I'll introduce the show and do some things and kind of bring you in. I forgot to mention that. But guys, if this is the first time you're finding us on this platform, we go live on Thursdays, usually about 6:15 or so, and it's a good way to interact with us so that you can say hello during the show, give us some comments, this type of thing, and we'll incorporate you into the show that way. It'd be kind of fun. What else to tell you? We're going to be talking about loneliness, a lot about Ben's book, Alone in Plain Sight. Say hello during the show. Why does my speakers keep on coming on?
You sometimes when I do TV, you've got to wear the little headpieces, and it echoes about 1 second after you talk, and so it really throws me off. It's the one thing.
Nightmare.
Yeah, I could not. I don't know how people do live television, because when you hear your own voice, it really mentally just kind of throws you for a loop. So I get it.
Yeah. Oh no, indeed. Yeah. I didn't know that though about TV. I haven't done much TV. So you're saying when they do the shows and they got the headphones or whatever, they're hearing a delay?
If you're hosting something live, usually they'll throw a little small earpiece in that's like skin colored. You can't even see it, and you're hearing the production room go on. So anything that's happening, commercial breaks, any questions that they want you to ask that you haven't asked, they'll maybe sneak in a little bit. But
that's because of the pause too, right?
Yeah, you can also hear yourself, and so it really throws you off.
No, I couldn't do that. It would take some getting used to for sure.
Yeah.
All right, YouTube Live, folks, we're getting ready to fire off the show that you'll hear on the air on Spotify and Apple iTunes and everywhere you get your podcast, as they like to say. So, hey, Neil, I was trying to scroll, and every time I scrolled on my computer, my speakers kicked off. So I'm not going to be able to see who comments and stuff. You might need to pop on and say, hey, we got a comment if we want to cover any of that. I'm just going to leave that to you. Is that cool?
Sounds good. Yep. And we are ready to start recording whenever you are, Chris. You ready?
You ready, Victoria?
I am. I got my tea and everything.
You ready, Mr. Higgins?
I'm so ready.
All right, let's do this.
All right. In 3, 2, 1.
Hello, this is Through a Therapist's Eyes, and we are at episode 265. And I'm looking and staring at my clock and date so I won't mess it up. Victoria, have confidence with me, right?
I do. I have confidence in you.
She usually corrects me when I screw the date up. March the 14th at 6:22 p.m. We are going to be talking about Alone in Plain Sight. And we are honored to have Ben Higgins hanging out with us from season 20. But I want you to think about this scenario right off the get-go in the opening. And it was an experience that I personally had that I think just launches exactly what it is that we're talking about today. And it was in what we call junior high school. When I switched off to go from a private Catholic school and to Triadelphia Junior High School. And it was I remember it like yesterday as a pivotal experience almost in life, because it was so freaking weird. Now, imagine a 14, 15-year-old young man getting on a school bus. And because I was going to a different school that I hadn't been to for 5, 6 years, and all these kids knew each other because they were in the public school system, I didn't know anybody on the bus. And we get off the bus, not having any idea where to go. There's a teacher, and they're just pointing to go to, the left. And so the kids all herd off the bus, and I walk down the path. It's a early morning, as school is those days, a little bit chilly in the air, and we're being funneled down to a big blacktop basketball court. And I just looked down on top of the hill at this court at the mass of humanity that was there, not knowing anybody. So I sat down on a rail, never forget, just wanting to sit, observe, and wait, only to have one of the teachers push me along saying, "Oh, no, you can't sit here." And so I went down the hill, and I literally walked around this basketball court full of kids, not knowing anybody. I don't know how I didn't just bawl my eyes out. But feeling the way that I felt, so lost, literally walking amongst all these kids, not having at that point in my life the skills to strike up a conversation or to join one of the groups and listen to what they were saying. None of those skills were there. And I mean to tell you, reading a little bit of Ben's book, Alone in Plain Sight, brought me to that very, very painful moment. So 3 questions I want you to think about as we go through this show. How many times have you felt alone, truly and painfully alone, even in plain sight and with others? Social media, does this help us? And how does this actually make us feel alone? And how do we get connected to others? We're going to talk a lot about how do we really get connected to others tonight. So this is Through a Therapist's Eyes. You can subscribe, click for the bell. Your job is to help us out, finding likes and all that kind of stuff, 5 stars. Contact at Through a Therapist's Eyes is the way that we engage you with our emails. Guys, this is the human emotional experience, which we endeavor to figure out together. That's what we say because we mean it. And Victoria, you have a point you always like to make sure we cover in the intro. What is that?
Yes. This is not to deliver any therapy services at all.
Figured I'd let you help you with that. Ben, can you start off by telling us about Miss B's class? Because I felt like we were connected together. You didn't even know it, but that was my story with junior high. And I thought of that as I was reading your experience in Miss B's class.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I am excited to be here, and I'm glad to talk to you all. The interesting thing happened when I did Alone in Plain Sight, when I wrote the book, was kind of reliving some of these moments that I think were transformational in who I am as an adult. And as you kind of pull this back and then you start to speak to people who maybe have read the book, everybody has a moment as a child that kind of stands out to them as that pivotal moment, good, bad, and different, that, people pull back these memories. And for me, the reason why I think I wrote the book was because at some point in my life, I did understand that I was not, that I was alone, or that I felt alone. And that was from this class. So I was in the 2nd grade. It was reading class, and we did partner reading that day. Now, remember, just to know, I'm an only child. And so I grew up, with the loving embrace of a family, never knowing what it feels like to be an outsider. And it was partner reading day, and I was the one that was not chosen in class. I vividly remember this moment. We're in a big pit, and then I was the one sitting off to the side, and the teacher came up to me then and said, "Hey, it's your lucky day. You get to be my partner." But I knew exactly what that meant. I knew that there was nobody in the class that saw me as their closest friend, the friend that they wanted to reach out to spend that hour with, or 30 minutes or with, or whatever. And it was the first time I really had felt that moment of rejection, but also the simple truth that maybe my reality of thinking, hey, everybody in this class is my best friend, and they're gonna I'm not gonna have any problem. That became false. But it also was one of the best moments in my life because it helped me relate with so many others who I think, especially in today's world, who do feel like an outsider, who do feel pushed aside by society, or maybe pushed aside by their friends groups or families or their workplaces. And so that's really why I wrote the book, was based off of that little story, was saying, hey, I know what it feels like, and it's not a good feeling, and I want to try to speak into that a little bit.
So powerful experiences that we have in our lives that honestly, as a therapist, I can tell you, just stick with us through our lives. We can revisit those moments. Absolutely. So let me give you a proper introduction, Ben. This is season 20. I looked it up, man.
Yeah.
2019. Yep, season 20 of on the Bachelor show on ABC. But I understand you're from Winona Lake. Read about the bridge. We'll maybe hopefully get to that. That I gotta say, that bridge sounds scary as all get out
Yeah.
up in your hometown, bro. Like,
Yeah.
holy cow. Since the show, Ben has been really busy. I mean, seriously busy in 2020, 2021, 2022. He's founded Generous International. It's a company dedicated to contributing profits to social issues around the world. Has something to do with a cup of coffee. Look it up, buy a cup of coffee. iHeartMedia podcast, Almost Famous. And I think that's the one where you kind of just work with Ashley and kind of talk about Bachelor stuff. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. It's a very fair
Yeah.
statement. 8 years going.
8 years going.
Yeah.
Dang. That's crazy, right? 2021. I got to tell you, a lot of times I read books and I have fellow authors from Morgan James and other shows with the Alone in Plain Sight. Like, guys, this is a reader. This is one that you really do want to catch. Captures a really genuine experience from a person such as Ben. And I'll leave some of that as a mystery, focusing on this issue that we all feel as our fellow panelist John Pope said, we live in an age of anxiety and the age of loneliness as a pandemic. So, this really does a good job of hitting that. And then you've got another podcast, Hope Still Wins. How did I do? What did I miss? And what is the Hope Still Wins podcast? Because that's the one that catches my eye a little bit, man.
Yeah, so I mean, life is fun, life is wild. We also got a bunch of restaurants out here in Denver and New Orleans. So if you're ever in those areas, I always love for people to go and visit the restaurants. It's the Culinary Creative Group, and Generous Coffee is my full-time gig. It's a job I don't get paid from. 100% of the profits are donated to nonprofits, and so it's a passion project, and we are a coffee company. So if you drink coffee, I would love for you to go check out Generous. It's been incredible. And so the Hope Still Wins podcast is a podcast that was launched during COVID, and it was really to highlight stories of humans who have done something. Either they're leaders in their own space, or they're in ministry. Maybe they're authors. Maybe they're just a really good neighbor of mine, or my parents who have a story to tell. Because one thing I realized was after the show, then I was asked to go and speak at places, or asked to go and attend places. And they were only doing it because of this reality television show. And so what I wanted to make a place, what I wanted to make space in my life for was to highlight the stories of humans, because I think everybody has a story to tell. And Hope Still Wins was really that place.
That's really awesome. Yeah, and
cool.
and tell that's a genuine reality for you. It shows. I appreciate the work that you've done with that. Victoria, do you got one of these lonely moments? I think you said you were going to think about that.
Yeah, and I think mine more kind of comes like later on in life. And I remember like when you brought up this topic, it made me think about after I had just given birth to my awesome almost 2-year-old now. And it's so you're surrounded by people when you first give birth, like family, friends, all these people. But like there were moments when I was like, I feel like I'm in this alone, and I feel like there's nobody here with me, even though I'm like literally surrounded by people.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, 56%, it's got to be higher today because it was trending up, and this was a study done in 2019. So it's a pretty old study at this point, but 56% of people were admitting to a deep-seated feeling of loneliness at some point in their life. And it's a very high percentage of that was kind of just an underlying lifestyle, like always kind of feeling like outsiders, always kind of feeling alone, always kind of feeling misplaced. So it's very common for somebody to have a story that they say, yeah, this is when I felt alone. But I also think it's really exciting when people can say, hey, I haven't had that feeling. Because those are the people, who can maybe teach us all a thing or two who have, and speak in some some ways of how they've navigated life without that. It could be a personality trait. It also just could be the way we've, the lack of pains that we've lived life within. But it's interesting that 56% of people have admitted to it, because by default, my theory is if you feel alone, there's somebody close to you that's also felt alone, which means that your shared pains actually connect you, which means you're not alone at all. And so, it's a valid feeling. I get it. It's not a feeling I want to push away from somebody and say, hey, you shouldn't feel this way. That's not how that works. But it is true that, you're not alone when you feel alone, because a lot of other people are struggling with it also.
Well, it's funny. We start out with definitions a lot of times when we talk about these different topics, whether codependency or it's bipolar or, different things with assertiveness. Like, what are we talking about? Listen to this definition, right? When one perceives a gap between one's desires for social connection and actual experiences of it. So I was listening to you, Ben. I was like, oh my gosh, he must be setting me up for this, because, you talk about a feeling, a perception, a way that people are experiencing this. That's really what gets at loneliness, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's it's hard to live life with a boisterous joy or peace when this kind of underlying tone of loneliness is kind of haunting you, and it pops up at random times. There can be moments where that goes away. You can feel great one night and wake up the next day and walk into a scenario. Maybe it's at the workplace, maybe it's at a church, maybe it's at your school, maybe it's just going to the mall, and all of a sudden you just feel like you're the outsider, like the kid looking through the window at the party he wasn't invited to, like you don't fit in, like there's something different, something wrong with you. And that comes up at random times, and sometimes it's hard to definitely pinpoint what it was the cause. But yes, I do think it's a part of our being. But I do believe there's tools and some truths to help combat that you can speak into yourself and live by once those feelings kind of arise.
Yeah. And it's a powerful reality. I mean, it really affects us physically, breaks our bodies down. We can get into talking about that tonight. But when we're talking about the age of anxiety and this experience, this profound loneliness that people are really struggling with, it really has become much more prolifically experienced, if not,
I lost Chris.
Oh, Chris.
Did I come back? Yeah. Enemy number
Yes,
one
you're
towards
back.
enemy number one towards depression is isolation. You have an isolation effect in your life, and it just makes depression like way 10 times horrible. So it has real impacts in people's lives.
Physically, it's equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day is what the study ended up kind of comparing it to. So
you said that before. How is that even possible? That blows my brain apart. Where's that come
from? University of Michigan and the University of Harvard came out with a study, and it said that it's equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day on your body. Because I think we can show over time, and you all know this better than me, but stress and anxiety, living in a constant place of both those things, loneliness, can kind of maybe thrown in that same bucket. Like it does, it shortens lifespans. There's something biological that it kind of changes in you. People that, are living in a place of joy and peace, oftentimes, maybe live a little longer. They don't show the side effects of aging as bad. And so, it's hard on the body, it's hard on the mind. And I also think when you're living in these places, it's hard on connection. It's hard on your connection to yourself, to others, to relationships, to God. It's when you're always feeling like an outsider. I think it kind of transfers over to all of those categories. And a life without connection is a life that oftentimes, can beat you up a little bit, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally.
It's a lot of cigarettes, brother.
Yeah, it is.
Now, Victoria knows that we don't really prepare a lot on the show. It's a genuine conversation. So I wanted the audience to know that I had prepared this with Ben. This is just genuine because I want to really normalize the reality of what it is that we feel. I mean, I think we've started to accomplish that a little bit but people really feel like they're the only ones that feel this way. Like that experience with Triadelphia Junior High School for me, or Victoria, your experience when you're giving birth and having all these people running around. It's like, we can be alone in plain sight. That's why I loved your title to your book, truly. To normalize this, Ben, I mean, you're borderline. I mean, you're a pretty strong influencer. You're a strong content creator and whatnot, right? Like how many posts and how many likes and how many whatevers you got, people would be amazed at, right? Is it possible that even you could still, in that status of mind or in that state of reality, still today feel lonely?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Because I bet people were like, I don't believe it. It's not, can't be true.
Oh, I think they do. I don't know. That's not usually a reaction nowadays. I think most people who have a following or have lived in the social media world, or we can be more connected than ever. I think maybe 10 years ago they'd be like, there's no way. That doesn't make sense. But I think nowadays enough people have felt this, seen this, experienced it, that they go, I get it. I haven't met many who would say there's no way. That's, that you've got to be I think it'd be shocking for me to meet somebody who said, hey, you got to be getting your fulfillment from all the, robots that follow you on social media, or you got to be getting your fulfillment from your moments on television or from whatever. Like, I think most people now would be like, yeah, that sounds like it wouldn't fulfill. It might be great. They're great things. They're good in their own right when used appropriately and correctly, and when you view it through the right lens. They're great opportunities. I never want to say they're not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most people today have a fairly rich view of what fulfillment looks like. And I don't think they're thinking that comes from social media. It's one of the messages I like to tell teenagers and people who are really kind of in this, hey, I want to become an influencer. I want to, get paid to post about stuff. And I want, the satisfaction of looking on my phone and seeing, 1 million people following me when I go to a high school of 2,000 and all that. I still believe young people think that will do something for them, that will make them feel whole.
Right.
But the sad but really hard truth that people find out at some point in their life is that it doesn't, and then they move on from that to find fulfillment in other places. And that is where I'm really interested and intrigued with the human experiences. What does it look like when you're on the search for fulfillment and the search for wholeness and the search for the good things of life? Like, are you, we've all, at least personally, I've gone through that process. I've done it in some terrible ways, made some terrible decisions, picked and choose where I thought I wanted my fulfillment from. And it took a long time to kind of find a place that said, that I felt, no, this is where I'm meant to be. This is what makes me whole. And it definitely was not through any type of fame or, fortune.
Yeah. I just think, people struggle as much as we're becoming, aware. I think I want to push back a little bit that the keeping up with the Joneses of reality and looking at all the posts and then looking at the people that we follow and seeing people that have all these people around them. I think people definitely get a little bit of misperception about that. Those people must be fulfilling. Like, for instance, Terry Bradshaw. We'll talk about sports here in a minute. We're getting to that, actually. But Terry Bradshaw, I'm a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, right? And, he's 5-time Super Bowl, 4-time Super Bowl champion. The guy's, he's arguably famous. He's on TV all day, and he'll talk openly and honestly about his ADHD and his major experiences with anxiety and how he feels alone in a lot of ways, still today. And I think that still surprises people a little bit. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. That's what my point was I don't think fame and fortune necessarily relate to fulfillment or happiness or joy or contentment. I think those two things are definitely the individual human experience. And I think it takes each individual person to kind of dive into what that path looks like. You've had multiple people from panels of CEOs to, championship athletes say, hey, that ring didn't feel like I thought it would. Right? I worked my whole life for this moment. Didn't feel like I thought it would.
It's huge.
It's huge. You've had CEOs say, hey, you know what, I'm worth $30 million, and they're still, thinking about how life hasn't worked out the way they wanted to, or they're not happy in whatever period of they're in, if it's, or whatever category they're in. And so I think at this point in time, we should start looking past that. I think we're going to all learn that those things said by enough people, felt by enough people, experienced by enough people will say, no, there's something bigger, greater, beyond any type of fame and fortune.
Yeah.
We'll have to. If not, we're gonna really struggle.
It'll implode. Right. No, I totally agree. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah, I am going to tip this a little bit. I did read a lot of your books, so tell me a little bit about yourself. It's a trick question, isn't it? The listening audience will know what I mean here in a little bit.
Well, I mean,
hopefully you do.
Really, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the big, you said a lot of it, right? But I think the big question that I really want to get out in the book at the beginning, it's the book is broken up into 4 categories: connection with self, connection and relationships, romantic relationships, both singleness and being with a partner. Connection with friendships, and then connection with something greater than ourselves. Because of my faith tradition and my belief system, I'll call that God. Not everybody would. And so that's how the book is broken up for the reader. And really, for the connection with self, the big question is, who are you? And that question comes about for me because there's a lot of labels that have been, placed on me, placed on Victoria, placed on you, Chris, throughout our lives. Labels, some that we're really proud of, some labels that really make us go, yeah, I'm getting it. And other labels that really can kind of push us down to a really bad spot. But we can all think of those labels. And so if we strip those labels away, what's left standing? And that's really the question I dig into in the first part of that book is, what's left standing if you're kind of naked and unashamed? If you're just standing there and saying, this is who I am at my core. And a lot of times that will become, some character attributes. Maybe it's loyalty. Maybe you have to be honest with yourself and say I'm not loyal. Whatever it may be. Who are you? If every label that somebody else has placed on you or the world has placed on you has been tossed aside.
Yeah. There's a lot in there in getting reconnected to yourself, and I'm got some thoughts about the way it was laid out and the way you talk about it. But just on a lighter note, how would you go with like who has been and what are some of the things that you like? What do you like to do? What are some of the ins and outs of what makes you you?
Yeah,
do you like the Steelers? Because we're gonna bond instantly if you say I went outside the state and I jumped over a couple.
No, I'm a Colts fan, so I'm the Captain Comeback. Very, very much a Colts fan. Always will be, from Indiana.
I like WVU, right? Because it's not in your conference, and we can bond on that, right?
Yeah. I mean, at times, I'm a Big Ten guy, so.
Victoria, help me out.
Yeah, I don't stretch too far outside the Big Ten typically.
You would not get any help from me.
Yeah.
Okay then. Okay. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Panthers over here. Okay.
I like I can get behind the Panthers. I like a good underdog. I like a good underdog story. I was a big Frank Reich fan, Victoria, so that one made me sad. I was really on your bandwagon while he was there. So yeah. I was sad about that departure. But the question is, who am I? It changes. It does, and I have to be okay with that. That's one of the things I like to talk about too, that the way you see yourself, the way you understand yourself is going to change. I heard it best from a mentor of mine who said his wife has been married to 7 different people in the course of their marriage. They'd been married 50 years.
I love that. Wait, let me get that right. She's saying that you've been married 50 years and to 7 different people.
7 different people.
Same person. I love that.
Yeah, because things change. Life happens. And it's one of the beauties, I think, I've only been married for 2.5 years, but it's one of the beauties that I see in marriage is, knowing the human that you married and believing in the human that you married and knowing that human is going to evolve and change over time and being really excited for that and being really pumped up about supporting those changes and doing it together now as a couple and kind of having each other's backs as that goes. But for me, one of the things that this changed for me pretty drastically when I took the Enneagram. Now, I'm not an Enneagram freak. I don't claim to sit up here and tell you all the ins and outs of every number and every level. But I did take the Enneagram, and I learned a lot about myself through it. I feel like it was a good tool for me to understand myself a little bit better. I'm a 4, and one of the things that a 4 does and is known for is to be very in our own heads, as you can say.
Okay, people might not know what an ideogram is, and I actually don't. So what is that? It sounds like one of the personality inventories that are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big
sorry,
deal.
Victoria.
Yeah. It's a big deal. Yeah, you can really learn about the Enneagram. It got really big kind of in the church space for a long time because people were using it as a tool to understand their coworkers better, understand their own kind of spiritual pursuits better. You take this test, it spits out a number or a couple numbers, 2 numbers for you, and you kind of read some stuff. And I guess the best way to say it is you could say, yeah, I feel like that's me. I feel like that's putting words to emotions or feelings that I've never been able to put words or feelings to or words to. Or you say, no, I don't really relate with that. And that's fine too. But for me, when I took this test and an Enneagram 4 popped out, it really highlighted and lightened up my world because I realized one, there was at least some type of person out there that understood who I was. I felt like nobody in the world understood me. I feel like I was misunderstood my whole life, which is the characteristics of an Enneagram 4. You feel misunderstood. You're also very analytical, and so you're overreading into situations. So this is all me. This is how to explain myself. I'm very analytical. I care deeply. I do about conversation, about moments of interaction with other humans or moments interactions in group settings. And I'll read very far into that. And so I'm analytical. I'm also loyal. I hold loyalty as a really strong value to me. And at times it becomes the best thing about me, and at times it becomes the worst thing about me because I hold people to that standard as well. And sometimes it's an unattainable standard. So I don't just say, hey, as a friend, I want you to be loyal to me. That's oversimplifying it. But maybe I'll get really offended easily because of something they did that they didn't even mean to hurt me with. And so it's sometimes the best thing and sometimes the worst thing in my life that I am, but I understand it about myself. And so it's something that I have clarity on, I guess, at this point. And so that would probably be the ways I would understand myself if everything was ripped away. And the things I want to hold myself to. I've always said my kind of life motto is to leave, is to take less than what I left here on earth. And so
okay,
simple, content, and trying to help and not hurt.
It's funny, man. I think a lot of people would answer that and whatnot, with like, hey, yeah, I like this team or I enjoy doing this. And I was thinking about like maybe just asking a question. Okay, so you got a Saturday of 6 hours and nothing to do. What are you going to fill your time with? But no, I'm listening to you and I'm like, man, this dude seems to have taken a deep dive more than once on self, living out some of the things that you talk about in, the first part of Alone in Plain Sight. I mean, you've done a lot of dives on this, haven't you?
I've tried.
Yeah. I mean that as a compliment, of course.
Well, one of the things, is, as I just said, I want to help and not hurt. And I've been a part of a lot of things in my life that have hurt with really good intentions. Really good intentions that end up really hurting somebody or something in this world. And so now one of the ways that I think you can combat that, you sometimes mess up and it still happens and you give yourself a little grace for it, is to try to know what you're talking about, to try to understand all the sides to it. It's one of the beautiful things in my spiritual journey is to kind of try to understand where everybody's coming from all different places. It doesn't mean that my faith tradition changes. But what it does mean is at least I understand other people's stories. And so when I speak with them, to them, or hear from them, there's less pain involved. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I have, and it's something I'm intrigued by, but also just again, I want to try to walk through this life helping in the best ways I can. And the only way I know how to do that is to try to get some education.
Very cool. Yeah, you
Mhm.
seem to be a very curious mind. Victoria, we got to cover a little bit. You know the show. What do you want to know? I feel like we got to talk
About
about The Bachelor a little bit, right? Like,
I mean, I like grew up watching Bachelor, like with my mom, and then with in college and all that stuff. I guess like my question would be then like, where was your favorite place that you got to go to, or like your favorite thing that you got to do while you were like interacting with the show?
It's so boring. So I'm going to give you two answers here because one is my truthful answer,
Okay,
and that's going to be disappointing. My favorite place that we ever went was my hometown. We did a whole week in Warsaw, Indiana, and this is a town of
right.
9,000 people, and it was the coolest thing ever. You got to think about like being a hometown hero for a week. I mean, everybody
wow.
came, yeah, everybody
Yeah.
came out. I had so many familiar faces that would be there, which you live in a bubble when you're on this show, and so you don't
Right.
see a lot of familiar faces. You don't have the familiarity of life. And so when we did this whole week there, the town kind of blew up and it was incredible for me. Um, I loved it. And so that was my favorite place. But I would say a place that people might want to visit that actually is answering your question in a fair way would be Ireland. So when I was on The
Really?
Bachelorette, yeah, we went to Dublin and Killarney, Galway. All those places blew my mind. Like they were the coolest places, and there's a couple reasons. One, they're beautiful. There's so much history. That's obvious. But the really thing that stood out to me was you would go to a pub, and it would be people from 20 to 80 all singing together, sitting together, laughing together. And I was like, this is a picture of
Oh,
heaven for me
wow.
in a lot of
In
ways.
Ireland?
In Ireland. Like
Oh,
this is
porters and
fun.
stouts, good beer too.
Yeah, I mean it was incredible. Like just to see the camaraderie amongst ages, which you don't see here
I
in the
love
US.
that.
It is unfamiliar to see an 80-year-old sitting at the same table with a 20-year-old singing the same song and cheersing together. I thought that was amazing.
God,
It was an environment I could have lived in forever. And so um, I'd say Ireland was my favorite. Yes.
cool. I'm getting excited
Awesome.
because
I
I
will
think I
put
saw
on
your
the.
episode. I think I did. I think I saw it.
You did.
I think I did. Because I remember my wife will watch some of this. Which, by the way, I get to give a shout out. This might be the only show she might ever listen to. So shout out
Oh,
to Lisa. Very cool for
great.
me.
Hi,
Uh,
Lisa.
so I remember when you went to the hometown. I think because I heard your voice just describing it and talking about going to the hometown. Like I think that was on the TV. So anyway, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
It's
Did you
it's
enjoy
very
the show? Also,
um
experiences and the real relationship dynamics and the stress of it. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that I don't think people really know how to appreciate.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Victoria, you did have a second part of that question though that I did not answer. What was it?
I said, or the thing that you got to do,
Okay, the
like
thing,
I
yeah.
can't remember all of yours. Yeah.
The thing I got to do that I loved the most, Victoria, was we were in Jamaica, and it's hard to drive through Jamaica, and so
Hmm.
I, so everybody else would be driving like 5 hours to our next spot, and I would take a helicopter, and again, that's when I felt really cool. You get there in about 20 minutes, so I got to fly in a helicopter a lot, and that was awesome. But to answer your question, Chris, did I enjoy the show? Yes. I wish I would have enjoyed it more. I think I was very stressed out most of the time. I think it was a very overwhelming environment for me most of the time. I felt very incapable of being whatever it is they needed me or wanted me to be.
Can
I always
only
felt like I was,
imagine.
yeah, I remember a moment halfway through the season where they were so excited to show me the trailer for my season. And the tagline for my season was the perfect Ben, playing off the perfect 10. And I was so mad. I was so
Huh.
hurt because I was like, I can't live up to that. Like I'm ultimately
Right.
going to
Oh my
disappoint
God.
Yeah.
everybody.
It's impossible.
So, there was a lot of things about it that were fun. It was a great experience in my life. one that's changed my life in so many ways for the better. I would never take it back. I would say yes to it again if I was single at 25 all over again, just to have the opportunities that it's come from it. But it's 3 months of filming. It's 40 dates back to back to back to back. It's a lot of emotion from not only yourself but the people involved, and there's a lot of things happening where stories are being told that people aren't ready to maybe tell publicly, and now they're telling it to 11 million people on national television, and you got to kind of navigate that. But overall, yes, I would say it's been good for my life, and it's something that I am proud of in a lot of ways, that I did it, made it through it, and I'm still somewhat of the man I was before that, but also have grown maybe in some ways too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've talked more about The Bachelor and The Bachelorette in the last 46 hours or whatever than I ever have in my life. So I have developed a couple curiosities. I'm sure you're attached to some of the ins and outs of the I don't know, what do you call them, like contestants or whatever? I don't know what the proper lingo would be. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Contestant.
Yeah.
How many people have really gotten married? I mean, that's not the idea now anymore, is it? Is it just the show that where you get engaged or not? People got married, or I mean, how are the realities, I guess, in talking to the other bachelorettes, the other young women, the other young men, about what that whole finding love thing is, to shine realism on it.
Yeah, I mean the percentages took a drop there for a while, but a lot of people nowadays are in the last 8 seasons.
Married?
Yeah, or getting very close, have it planned. I'd say.
Wow. Okay.
It took a dip there for a couple years, and then it's kind of back, and so I do think the idea stayed the same from the beginning of the show. It's kind of their bread and butter. But it also, I think, for any successful couple that comes from the show, they're going to have to kind of redate post-show. They're going to have to figure out what life looks like. They're going to have to get each other's cell phone numbers. They're going to have to find out each other's middle names. They're going to have to understand what life looks like. And I think that's what a lot of couples are doing today, is they're kind of reinvesting outside of that show when it works out, when they want it to work out well.
I'm a little more familiar with the reality show Survivor. We've watched a lot of Survivor over the years, and in intense circumstances, I know psychologically you do get really involved connections. I like what you said in the book, right? We experience things together, and that connects us. And so, but I hear you saying after the show you have to redate, you have to relearn each other, and I imagine the same thing happens with Survivor friendships, because it definitely forges a new relationship.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I mean, it's an uncomfortable, unfamiliar environment. And I think once you get back in some familiarity, there is switches that happen, right? Life doesn't look like it does on those shows in the real world. And then new responsibilities are kind of pulling at you. I went back to my full-time job for 2 years post my time as the Bachelor because I needed health insurance. And so I was working 9 to 5 Monday through Thursday, and flying to LA on Fridays to do whatever interviews or whatever obligations I needed to do. And I did that for a long time until, I found a couple other paths that allowed me to leave that job and kind of move into a different direction. But it's a very weird time for a bunch of 20-year-olds. I mean, I was 25 when I was on the show. I was just out of college a few years. I was trying to figure out what the world looked like without school and without, kind of the complicate or the connectedness of having your peer group around you. And I was in my first job out of college at the time. And so, you kind of reconnect, and then life switches up a little bit. So when I talk to leads today, one of my biggest words of advice for them is to write down who you were before the show, because you kind of forget. It spits you up, it chews you up and spits you out when you get on a show, because you're instantly almost famous for a few months of your life.
That is a cool title for a podcast. You should come up with that.
Yeah, I should.
Well, let's turn gears to social media, right?
Okay.
And Victoria, you guys are of the same cohort and whatever. I mean, I want you guys almost to kind of bang out with this and just see, Ben, you're interestingly living in the middle of social media. And Victoria, you're sort of, as we've talked about on the show before, you're a native to it, which, by the way, I want to say, let me highlight a couple episodes for our show, because Ben, we've talked about this before, right? Okay. Episode 49, we talked about loneliness has become an epidemic, going all the way back to the beginning, under 50, right? Yeah. And then episode 197, we talked about, do people know how to be friends? That was a really cool topic, I felt like, when we kicked that around. Episode 194, we talked about stop numbing and start living, which had a lot to do with how we numb out, and really wanting to switch that over into living. And then lastly, does social media and cell phones affect mental health? We hit that very early on as well. So we've talked about, Victoria, social media, how living in the middle of it, being native to it, Victoria, as you are, this actually increases loneliness. Yeah. Like, I've been trying to work this out in my mind, and in working with people in therapy. It's like a complete oxymoron, and it's just an amazing human experience. So what do you younger folks, does that make sense? I mean, it's not really a question, I guess. It's just like a wow, what is this human experience, right?
Well, I mean, I work with all age people, like literally like 5 to 65. And I mean, I work with like a lot of like young adults, fellow millennials as myself. And like, I mean, yeah, like social media comes up a lot. We are constantly talk about like making friends. That's normally like, especially with somewhat the male population I work with, but a lot of like the female population I work with, it is a lot of like, how do we make friends, and how do I like go out and do that in this age of like social media, and what, like there's like Bumble Friends now, and like all these things that you can use to make friends, but it's not always the easiest, and then that goes back to loneliness. So I think, yeah, like social media definitely plays a part in, I would say, especially like millennials and younger, specifically, more than like, Chris, no offense, your generation.
My generation is different, baby. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
But I want to remind you, Ben, we have a guy who's much older than me on the show. I told you, John. So I'm just want to throw that in there.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, like, what's Ben's perspective on like social media and loneliness and like people our age.
Yeah. You cut out a little bit on me there, but I think I got the question. What's my perspective on social media?
I can read it.
You're a little cut out. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, that's right.
I did get your question, I think. What's my perspective on social media and loneliness for people like kind of our age? I think social media for me does a couple different things. I think it's a very complex platform or media that I don't have always a healthy relationship with. I want to be honest. It does bring about some very specific negative emotions for me. Emotions, when I say negative, they don't make me the best version of myself. And that's envy and jealousy. It's comparing a lot of myself to maybe other people that have been on the show, or maybe other people that I went to high school with. Peers, I guess.
I don't know how you don't. Honestly, the way these things are created, I just don't know how you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do. I think that's something that is common. But there's also a lot of benefits for me. I get to see, I don't think I would be keeping in touch with my high school third, different group of friends person if it wasn't through social media. Even right now, we have a big snowstorm in Colorado. I posted a picture of it on my story, and I heard from 3 people that I don't think I would have any connection with at this point in my life if it wasn't for social media and the ability for them to pick up their phones and be like, hey, that looks crazy. And I'm saying, it is crazy. How's life? There are benefits to it too. I think the thing that social media has done is we feel like we're more connected to people than ever. We feel that way because we're seeing more information than ever. We're seeing what our friends are doing The difference that we're not doing, though, is taking it one more step and actually connecting with them, actually give them a call, actually telling them how we feel, actually sitting down with them and have, breaking bread, doing the things that we as humans, I believe, were always created to do. We've stopped doing because we feel like we're being a good friend because, yeah, we saw that they were in Hawaii last week on vacation, but we just don't care to ask them about it because we get all the updates on social media. And so I think over time, when we get in that rhythm and that habit, there's a great divide. There's a great divide between actually knowing what's going on in somebody else's life and believing that you do. But here's where I think it switches and it becomes personal. I think other people are doing the same thing. So if I'm doing that, my best friends are doing that as well. They're seeing my life updates on Instagram and social media. And as a result, they're not reaching out to me. And so I'm feeling more and more alone because it feels like none of my friends care. Feels like none of them are actually engaging in my life at all. They're not worried about my life. They're not asking questions about my life because they've seen my life on social media and they just believe by them seeing it and double tapping it, it's giving me the validation or it's giving me the understanding that, yes, I'm still there. And yes, I still care. So it goes both ways. It's our behavior. And then it's also the behavior of others towards us that I think is really causing this gap with when it comes. So yes, I don't think it's all unhealthy. I would not advocate for wiping it off the map because I do believe there's people out there who are benefiting from it. However, I believe that we are still not very good at knowing the pros, the cons, and the ways to navigate this in a healthy way.
So here's the thing. It's fascinating, man, because I'm sitting here listening to you, dude, and I'm like, wow. Because I read your book and kind of feel like I know some of the story, I also think that's where I'm observing.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, I know there was some of the drug stuff you shared in your book and the injury and the sports that no longer was. And, there was several things that like broke you down, it feels like. And you've done several deep dives on self. And the way that I just heard you talk about the bigger picture of like human connection and the learning that younger people are needing to do with that, that doesn't come, like, you've done a lot of work to get to that point, feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've always said I don't want to hang out with anybody that doesn't feel like they've been broken at some point in their life, because I believe everybody has. And
that's a big statement. Say that again.
I don't want to hang out with anybody that hasn't been broken at some point in their life because you learn a lot through, the dark nights of the soul or through the heaviness that comes from life. And then you work through it and hopefully you work through it. And the people that work through it oftentimes have lessons to tell, or they're a little more authentic in their messaging and genuine in their response. And I don't say that to say I don't want to hang out with people. I say that because I think everybody probably has a moment where they've been broken. And some maybe in more drastic ways than others. There's no way to quantify pain, maybe, on that level. Like if it hurt you and you've learned through it, I'm intrigued by it and I'm intrigued by you. And so that's one thing. I also think, I think the search for relevancy, for a long period of my life was kind of this like, calling card. It was why people wanted to work with me is because I was relevant. It was what agents and managers were pushing me towards is how do you stay more relevant? How do you keep in the headlines? How do you stay on top of stuff? Ultimately,
it's a horrible pressure, right?
It's a horrible pressure because ultimately what that does is it makes you adapt to whatever needs to be relevant at the time. And so you're changing yourself constantly. You're always looking for the next, person to hang out with who might blow you up to the next magazine or the next headline. You're always looking for the story that needs to be told, given whatever's cool at the time or wear the cooler clothes or all those things. And so you ultimately end up changing yourself along the way. And there's no concrete foundation for who you are. You forget, you end up forgetting who you are as a human and who others are to you. And you're just out to stay cool. And so that changed pretty drastically in my life when I kind of gave up the search of relevancy. And I said, okay, once I kind of got some comfort and some contentment and excitement around my job, my family, the path that I was moving on, then I said, okay, people are going to get to know me for who I am. And it's no longer going to be to adapt to, make the next headline. And so that also was a moment of kind of breaking, but also relearning for me that I like to talk about, publicly as well, because, a lot of people are trying to do that. They're trying to figure out how to stay relevant, and they're wondering why it feels so empty. Well, it's because, you've lost yourself in the process.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's just such a lot there. Victoria, I feel like you're coming in and out. Are you still with us? Okay.
Yeah, I just sorry had to get my phone charger because my
Okay.
phone's gonna die.
Technology and the way stuff works. Well, listen here. I want to take a quick break and highlight our sponsor and see if you'd be willing to kind of pop some of that, Victoria. And before I do, while you gather your thoughts about remembering who our
Sure.
sponsor is and stuff, I want to say that, listen, like, your job is to help us, guys. If you like the content that we do, please press the like button. All that stuff really helps us out with the social media aspect. What else to say? We have that buy me a cup of coffee to help the show out so we can keep doing the things that we're doing. And we have the sponsor, which is First Horizon Bank, right, Victoria?
That's right.
Go.
And they're do you want me to go? Okay,
Yeah, go.
They're located from Memphis, Tennessee, and they are just your friendly neighborhood bank. They're there to help you with financial literacy, getting accounts together, making sure you're managing your money in a good way, provide you with whatever kind of financing services that you need.
Ben, she's gonna be so mad at me the way I popped her for that.
That's
What?
good.
You did
You
great.
did
First
great.
Horizon Bank. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Nice.
Let's spend a little bit of time with the actual book. And like I said, guys, I think I said it on the Facebook Live thing. I'll do you, Ben. You don't have to wave it around. I'll do it for you. This guy's too humble that he won't promote it. I don't think like it needs to be, because on the Facebook Live before the recorded show started, I really made the statement like, look, this is a good guide. It's a good book. I could say that, Ben, to you publicly. Having done therapy since '95 in one form or another. That's 1995, just so you know, if you're doing the math there. Anyway, I've seen a
Figured.
lot of I've seen a lot of things come and go in my time, and I've gotten to read a lot of books in my time, with Morgan James authorship and different, circles that I'm able to honored to be in with now. And I told my wife, like, dude, check this one out and read it, because it really has a very good encapsulation of genuine real life experience with some of your friends and the stories that you tell, and such an important topic as connecting. Like, this here is a good one, guys. You got to check out this book, Alone in Plain Sight. And the subtitle, right? Searching for connection when you're seen but not known. And I'll tell you why that's such a powerful experience from my therapy brain, Ben. I was at a conference, and they were asking, what's the most painful experience that you think you can experience? And our therapist brains are going like, oh, well, your mama dying or daddy dying or death, or, oh, a big one would be your baby dying. I mean, that one as a parent just would blow my brain away. It's like, we're guessing all these things, and the presenter's like, no, no, no. And she laid it out. She's like, the most painful experience that a human being can have is when you feel invisible. Okay. It is a powerful psychological reality that we know, so far as psychologically, when babies do not receive the nurturance that they need, the care that they need, the touch that we need to feel and experience with other human beings, they simply die. It's like, life's not worth living, almost, they psychologically experience. Like, we know being invisible is such a powerful thing. So the comments that I'm driving to is, I love the way, the parts are experienced, and I think it's through a long journey, a lot of journey that you've done. But so the listening audience understands, it's cool, because part one is no longer alone, and then you go on, and part two is no longer alone, and you go on. Part 3 and 4 has that same that same repeating sentence. And I think that's so cool because part one is no longer alone, reconnected to self, no longer alone, reconnected to others, no longer alone, reconnected romantically, and no longer alone, reconnected with God. And that is a Christian orientation, but you point out your creator, the God of your understanding, a thing greater than yourself. It's a powerful way of looking at things. I thank you for your work. It's pretty cool. I don't have a specific question, just leading up to like, wow, man, good job.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think the one note in there would be the romantic section is also, it's mostly about singleness, and it's mostly about those who are single and wanting, and single and not wanting, and both those, the value in both those things. The people who are single and just saying, hey, you know what, I want to live life without that partner, because it opens me up to all new opportunities and all new places and all new kind of things that I can do. The freedom of that sounds really intriguing to me, and that's great. That's awesome. Or the people that are single and kind of looking and wanting a partner, and knowing, the truth to what does that look like when you're feeling like, my goodness, nobody is ever going to want to, spend their life with me. Nobody's ever going to want to make that commitment towards me. But the beauty in that messaging, kind of what doesn't feel beautiful at the time, is actually absolutely beautiful. And so that's a part of the book that I was really proud of, but also really wanted to highlight, because I believe it's at some point we're all single, and so we've all felt it.
I love that you did that. I'm going to tell you exactly why. There's some people in my circle that are going to be very happy with you in that way. So, true story, if you'll allow me the liberty. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine. Her name is Trish. I could say that because she's been on her show. She made all this public. And anyway, she's a colleague. I've known her for years in different ways and whatnot. And I was talking to her, and how did it come up? We were just chewing the fat, honestly, and we were talking about dating kind of came up, and we were talking about getting married come up and whatever. And she made a comment that, like, yeah, because she's never been married, and she's like my age. And she had a friend that is in the same boat that she knows of. And I mean, I wasn't I was unfiltered. I wasn't trying to be political or anything. I was like, all right, well, Trish, what's wrong with you guys? What happened? What's wrong? She just stopped. She's like, Chris. I was like, whoa, what? I'm sorry. I knew I was instantly in trouble because it was a spot for her. And she talked about that you're just pointed out, the being single your whole life, and how that fits in, and being connected still in the way that you just described. Like, that's a whole population of people, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. So we brought her on the show and we talked about that. Yeah.
It's great. It's awesome. There's so much good that can come from that, and there's so much value that can come from being single. It's an amazing life choice, one that I totally understand and totally support. And you know what? There's very few of us who have the courage that they have to make that choice or to walk that road. And I think it's a very courageous path in life, and it's one that I really respect. And so I definitely wanted to make sure that anybody out there that heard that. And it's also one, no matter what, again, faith tradition you come from, the Bible's pretty clear that, you know what, it's a great life choice. It's a ton of fun. You have so much freedom. There's so many things you can do with that. That's super cool. And so, I think the church in general over the last, 75 years has really put a pressure on, you need to get married. You need to do this. Why aren't you finding somebody? What's going on? Let me set you up with this person, this person. And I think we've done an injustice to the people out there who are just like, I'm just not interested. Like, stop making that your calling card on my life. You don't get that. You don't get to make that decision for me. And I think that's awesome. We also forget Paul's pretty direct words when he speaks and says, no, singleness is totally cool. Rock it.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. Corinthians and a lot of multiple places. Yeah, that's and Paul's, of course, an apostle. He's in the biblical text and a strong character in the Bible. I think there's just different things that we can go with insofar as specific little spots from the book. I mean, I don't know how to whittle it down a little bit. And I mean, short of doing a Rogan style podcast where we just have the long format, which I would love. How are we doing on time, by the way? want to respectful of your time. Are we okay?
I got 7 minutes to my next meeting.
7 minutes to your next meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Glad I asked. So how do we summarize this stuff up in points from the book? I mean, I think what I want to do then is tell us about, set this up when you were with the theater group.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually want to read what you said from the book, because I think that really encapsulates a lot of what it is that is not only your book, but your work, and what it is that you said to this theater group. Do you remember that part?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Of course you do.
You know,
I didn't want to put you on the spot. I thought, as I was saying that, I'm like, oh God, what happens if he forgets that part?
No, I can't forget it. I will say, to summarize the book and hit the points, is that, I'd love people to read it. And my hope when I wrote it was that they would close the book, and if anything else, just said, hey, I feel a little less alone, or maybe a lot less alone, or maybe they just say, I feel less alone. Whatever they want to say or feel, that was my hope, and that's kind of was the message there. The theater group was a request that I got a few years ago when I was coming off the show, doing all this really cool stuff, hosting television shows. And my cousin called and said, hey, will you come to a small little town in Indiana and be a part of my community theater for 3 shows? We're doing Grease, and she was a senior in high school at the time. And I was like, there's a lot of things that I'd rather be doing than this. I'm way too cool for this, was my first reaction. And then I slept on it. And I was like, I got to do it. Like, I got to do this. 1, because I love my cousin and she's awesome. 2, because I never want to get too cool for something. That's not who I am. So I'm going. So I went, kind of in summary, watch these people, these kids practice and kind of go through everything. And there's people from there's kids that from all different backgrounds, cultures, upbringings, sexual orientations, just a big old mix of kids. Like, I mean, you had it was theater. So you had like all the mix of kids. I mean, the theater, if you want to meet some wild high schoolers, just go to the theater group, because they're big personalities, and they're different than anybody I hung out with in high school, because I was an athlete. But they're beautiful and they're amazing. And so at the end of all this, there is their last show, and they were holding hands, and they were talking about all the things that they're going to miss about this theater group. Hey, this is the place I felt most seen. This is the place I felt most loved. This is the place that's understood me the best. This is where I've had my friends for the last 12 years. All these things. And it hit me. I was like, well, and so I stepped out, because it was my turn to share. And I was like, I don't know any of you, so I can't say I'm going to miss any of you. But what I can say is everything you've said in this circle, it has value, because you've tasted and seen what good community looks like. You can go take that to wherever you're going to be going next. Your maybe job in life is not to be community consumers, but it's to be community builders, and to build communities like you've tasted and seen here in this theater group. That was my message, is to be community builders. So I don't know if that's the part you're going to read, and I just ruined it for you.
You stole a little bit of thunder, but live and in the person is way better. Yeah, I did, and I still want to read it, because you were a little bit more expounding on that in the book, and it was powerful and poignant, because everyone's experienced the explosion that happens in graduation, for instance, and this group was so nicely described. Everyone was holding and bonded and in a circle, and the group was so strong, and they were suddenly one by one admitting, wow, you guys accepted me, and wow, you've been my group, and why? And it was dawning on them that this was going to happen. And what you said to them is, you just expressed everything that makes this community so beautiful, all the things that you've allowed you to connect you on a level that you've never connected with another human in your life, all the things that have allowed you to feel loved and accepted and trusted and safe. This is beautiful. And I know you all are scared, because I don't know what the next stage of life is going to bring, which I would interject we all live in throughout our life cycle, right? I know you are hurting, because you do not want to lose the connections that you have in this room right now. But then you continued, instead of mourning what may be about to end, you should celebrate it. You should tell one another, thank you for teaching what true love looks like, what true community looks like, what true connection looks like. I know that none of you know what the future may hold, but I want to challenge you to take what you've learned from this circle of people and go out and create this in every season of your life, no matter where you may go, no matter who you may be with, no matter if this is one person or 8. Be the community starter. And you know how. Think about what you connected here. It wasn't just the productions you pulled off. More than that, it's how you connected over your hurts and your vulnerabilities. You took time to get to know one another and love one another. And I know from experiences that many people in this world feel completely disconnected and misunderstood. They need a group like this because you have been taught connection through this group, that you can take the steps to connect with them throughout life. Wow. The power of learning how to do that and being a connection starter and being a part of a group and allowing yourself to reach out with vulnerability and the courage that it takes to connect, because connecting can be scary. Powerful stuff, brother. I'm impressed.
Well, I appreciate it. No, I mean, I think when you listen and learn from others, power comes from it. And so you just get to be the communicator. And, well, I got to be the communicator there.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. Well, I'm aware that we got to wrap down. Anything that we want to send in conclusion, Victoria, Ben, and I'll wrap us out of here.
My conclusion is always mental health related, and that, kind of what we said at the beginning, you're not alone. If you are feeling lonely, which is kind of ironic, but, use the resources that you have access to, read the book, participate in therapy, do the things that are going to help you feel less alone in the world.
Thanks, Victoria. I would say I'd love for you to read the book, but I'm not going to force that upon anybody. You can go to generouscoffee.com if you want to support something awesome in even a small way. Look at some coffee, learn about the story. I would love for everybody out there to do that. And then yes, Alone in Plain Sight. You can still get on Amazon. And I'll see if a few people purchase here in the next couple days. I'll give you all the credit. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the conversation.
Well, I'm going to make you interested in checking out Through a Therapist's Eyes, Ben, because in the last 10 minutes, I've just made a decision, unless you object. But I think what I want to do is get our panel and talk and focus. Like, I'm not done talking about this. I'm way too warmed up. So I want to take a couple of the things in your book and have John and Victoria and I talk about, because I want to take a deeper dive on let's get connected. How do we get connected? So I think I'm going to spend a whole show on that next week. Sound interesting?
I think it sounds great. I'll be listening.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna get the old man John, myself as a young person, and the millennial Victoria talking about a deeper dive on Ben's thoughts on how do we really get connected. That's what we're going to do next week. Ben, I really appreciate you hanging out with us, brother. It was very, very kind of you. I look to maybe coordinate with you in the future and stay in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you both. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.